The first thing I noticed wasn't the wedding. It was the music. Soft violin notes drifted through the summer air as the taxi turned onto my street. I remember smiling. After 3 exhausting months overseas, that sound felt peaceful, comforting. Home. I leaned back in my seat and stared out the window. For weeks, I had imagined this moment. Emily's reaction, the surprise, the tears, the hug, the kiss, the way she'd scream my name before running into my arms. I had replayed that scene in my head hundreds of times. I had even bought her a gift, a beautiful diamond bracelet that cost more money than I should have spent. But Emily deserved it. At least, that's what I believed. The taxi slowed down, then stopped. "Here we are, sir," the driver said. I smiled and reached for my wallet. Then I looked through the windshield, and everything changed. At first, I thought the driver had brought me to the wrong address. My house was there. My driveway was there. The mailbox was there. But the rest looked completely different. White tents covered the backyard. Luxury cars lined both sides of the street. Elegant flower arrangements stood near the entrance. Dozens of guests walked around carrying champagne glasses. My smile disappeared. What the hell? The driver looked confused. "You know these people?" I didn't answer. My heart suddenly began beating faster. I stepped out of the taxi. The warm summer breeze hit my face. For several seconds, I simply stood there staring, trying to understand what I was seeing. Then I noticed the giant white sign near the entrance. Gold letters. Beautiful handwriting. My stomach dropped. "Congratulations, Emily and Daniel." I blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. Emily and Daniel. Not Emily and Ethan. Emily and Daniel. A cold chill ran through my entire body. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." This had to be a mistake. Some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe another Emily. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe. Then the music grew louder. And I heard the voice. Her voice. I would recognize that voice anywhere. Emily. The woman I loved. The woman I planned to marry. The woman I trusted more than anyone in the world. Slowly, I walked toward the backyard. Each step felt heavier than the last. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. The closer I got, the worse it became. Then I saw her, standing beneath a massive arch made of white roses, wearing a wedding dress. The wedding dress. The exact one we had picked together 6 months ago. The exact one I paid for. I remembered that day clearly. She had twirled around inside the bridal shop, laughing, smiling, telling me she couldn't wait to become my wife. Now she stood there, looking happier than I had seen her in months. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at another man, Daniel Brooks. I recognized him immediately. Emily had mentioned him before. A wealthy real estate investor. Someone she claimed was only a business contact. Someone she insisted I didn't need to worry about. Someone she said was just a friend. Apparently not. Daniel stood beside her in a custom black tuxedo, one hand resting comfortably on her waist, like he belonged there, like she belonged to him. My vision blurred. 5 years. 5 years together. 5 years of memories. 5 years of sacrifices. 5 years of believing we were building a future. Gone. Just like that. I felt sick. Then I noticed something even worse. My family was there. My cousins. My aunt. Even my younger brother. All sitting in the audience. Watching the wedding. Smiling. Applauding. As if this was completely normal. As if I didn't exist. A painful knot formed in my throat. How long had they known? Days? Weeks? Months? Had everyone been lying to me? Had everyone known except me? The minister cleared his throat. The crowd grew quiet. The ceremony was starting. I found myself moving closer, almost without realizing it. Nobody stopped me. Nobody noticed me. Not yet. The minister smiled. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Daniel Brooks and Emily Harper." The words echoed inside my head. Union. Daniel Brooks. Emily Harper. Each word felt like a hammer striking my chest. Emily looked radiant. Daniel looked proud, and everyone around them looked happy. Everyone except me. Suddenly, one of the guests turned around. A middle-aged woman near the back. She froze. Her eyes widened. Then she pointed. Another guest turned. Then another. Whispers began spreading through the crowd, like dominoes falling one after another. Heads turned. Faces changed. People started staring. Emily noticed the movement. Confused, she looked toward the crowd. Then her eyes found mine. The moment she saw me, everything changed. The smile vanished from her face. Her skin turned pale. The bouquet slipped slightly from her hands. Daniel noticed her reaction. "What is it?" he asked. Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. She was staring directly at me, like she had just seen a ghost. "Ethan." The word barely escaped her lips. The entire wedding fell silent. Daniel turned around. His confident smile disappeared instantly. Guests exchanged nervous looks. The minister stopped speaking. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. For several seconds, the only sound came from the violin players awkwardly lowering their instruments. I slowly stepped forward. My suitcase rolled behind me across the grass. Every eye followed me. I stopped just a few feet from the altar, close enough to see fear in Emily's eyes, close enough to see panic spreading across Daniel's face. Then I looked at the crowd, at my family, at my friends, at all the people who had kept this secret. And finally, I looked at Emily, the woman I loved, the woman who was supposed to be my future. I swallowed hard, then asked the question everyone was afraid to answer. "Can somebody explain why my fiancé is getting married to another man?" I paused, looking around my own property. In my backyard, the silence that followed was deafening. And that was the moment everything started falling apart. The silence was unbearable. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Dozens of guests sat frozen in their chairs, staring at me as if I were some unexpected disaster that had just crashed through the ceremony. Maybe I was. I looked directly at Emily. 5 years together. 5 years of trust. 5 years of believing she loved me. And now she stood in a wedding dress beside another man. I wanted an explanation. I deserved one. But Emily couldn't even look me in the eye. Her hands trembled around the bouquet. Her breathing became uneven. For the first time since arriving, I noticed something strange. She wasn't just shocked. She looked terrified, as if she had been afraid this moment would eventually happen. Daniel stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of her. Protective, possessive, like he had every right to stand there. "Who invited him?" Daniel asked coldly. The question stunned me. Who invited him? This was my house, my backyard, my property. Yet somehow I was being treated like an intruder. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Nobody answered. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You have some nerve," I said. Daniel folded his arms. "You should leave." The crowd gasped. My jaw tightened. "Leave?" I slowly pointed toward the house. "My name is on the deed." Then I pointed toward the lawn. "The grass you're standing on belongs to me." I looked around. The chairs belonged to me. The house. The backyard. The property taxes. The mortgage payments. Everything. I had paid for it all. Daniel's expression darkened. But before he could respond, another voice interrupted. "Ethan." I turned. My younger brother, Ryan, stood from his seat. He looked nervous.
Guilty.
Like a man carrying a secret too heavy to hide. "What?" I snapped. Ryan swallowed. "We need to talk." A terrible feeling settled into my stomach. The same feeling you get moments before hearing something that changes your life forever. I stared at him. "What do you mean we need to talk?" Ryan glanced toward Emily, then toward Daniel, then back at me. His silence told me everything. He knew. My own brother knew. My hands curled into fists. "How long?" I asked quietly. Nobody answered. "How long have you all known?" Still nothing. I looked at my aunt. She lowered her eyes. I looked at my cousin. He looked away. I looked at my mother. And that's when my heart truly broke. Because she couldn't look at me either. The answer was written all over her face. They all knew. every single one of them. The betrayal hit harder than Emily's wedding ever could. These weren't strangers. These were my family. The people who were supposed to protect me, support me, love me. Instead, they sat here, watching my life collapse. My mother slowly stood. Tears filled her eyes. Ethan, don't. Her lips trembled. Please let me explain. I shook my head. No. The anger building inside me was becoming impossible to control. You had months to explain. My voice grew louder. Months. Guests began whispering. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked uncomfortable. Good. They should. My mother looked broken. But I wasn't ready to forgive anyone. Not today. Not after this. Then Emily finally spoke. Ethan, please listen. I looked at her. The woman I once imagined spending the rest of my life with. The woman who had called me every night while I worked overseas. The woman who ended every conversation with the words, I love you. Now those words felt meaningless. What exactly should I listen to? I asked. Emily's eyes filled with tears. It's not what you think. The crowd shifted again. I almost laughed. Not what I think. I had literally walked into my own backyard and found her getting married. There weren't many alternative interpretations. Daniel suddenly grabbed Emily's hand. And that's when I saw it. The ring. A massive diamond ring. Far larger than the one I had bought her. The sight felt like another knife twisting into my chest. Daniel noticed me staring. A smug smile appeared briefly on his face. And in that moment, something clicked. I understood. Money. It was always money. Daniel was rich. Much richer than me. While I spent months overseas working my way toward success, Daniel had arrived with millions already in his bank account. Luxury cars. Private investments. Expensive vacations. The kind of lifestyle I couldn't yet provide. A wave of bitterness washed over me. Had she traded me for a bigger bank account? Was that all our relationship had been worth? Emily saw the accusation in my eyes. No, she said quickly, as if reading my thoughts.
No, Ethan.
That's not what happened. Then tell me what happened. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The silence lasted several seconds. Too long. Way too long. Because innocent people don't struggle that hard to tell the truth. Finally, she whispered, I never wanted you to find out this way. My stomach dropped. Find out what? The words echoed inside my head. Find out. Not see. Not witness. Find out. There was something else. Something bigger. Something nobody had told me. Ryan suddenly stepped forward. Ethan, his voice shook. You need to know the truth. Every muscle in my body tensed. The truth.
At last.
Whatever secret they had been hiding was finally coming out. I looked around at everyone. At my family. At Emily. At Daniel. Nobody looked comfortable. Nobody looked happy. And for the first time all afternoon, Daniel seemed nervous. Very nervous. That caught my attention. Because powerful men don't get nervous unless they're afraid of what's about to be revealed. Ryan took a deep breath, then looked directly at me. And the next words that came out of his mouth changed everything. Ethan. He swallowed hard. Emily didn't choose Daniel. The entire wedding fell silent. I stared at him, confused. What are you talking about? Ryan looked toward Emily. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Then he said the one sentence nobody expected. She's marrying him because someone is forcing her to. And suddenly, the wedding wasn't what it seemed anymore. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody spoke. Ryan's words hung in the air like a thunderclap. She's marrying him because someone is forcing her to. I stared at him, certain I had heard him wrong. Forcing her? This wasn't some movie. People didn't force other people into marriage. Not anymore. Not in real life. Yet as I looked around, nobody was denying it. Not Emily. Not my mother. Not even Daniel. And that terrified me. Because it meant Ryan was telling the truth. What are you talking about? I demanded. Ryan looked toward Emily. Tears streamed down her face. For the first time all day, she looked less like a bride. And more like a prisoner. Ethan, she whispered. I'm sorry. The pain in her voice hit me harder than anything else. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to hate her. But suddenly nothing made sense anymore. If she wasn't choosing Daniel, then why was she standing at that altar? Why hadn't she called me? Why hadn't she told me the truth? I looked at Daniel. His jaw tightened. The confidence he had displayed earlier was gone, replaced by irritation, almost panic. And that told me something important. Daniel was afraid. Not of me, of the truth. I took a step forward. What is going on? Emily wiped tears from her eyes. Her hands shook violently. I tried to tell you. What? I tried so many times. I felt frustration building again. Tried to tell me what? She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. Then she finally spoke. It started 6 months ago. My stomach tightened. 6 months. That was around the same time I accepted the overseas contract. The job that was supposed to secure our future. The job that kept me away from home. The job that apparently changed everything. Emily took a shaky breath. After you left, my father got sick. I frowned. Her father? What do you mean? Her voice cracked. Cancer. The word hit me like a punch. I remembered her father. George Harper. A kind man. The closest thing I ever had to a second father. I hadn't known. Nobody told me. Emily looked devastated. The treatments were expensive. I felt sick. Very sick. Because I already knew where the story was heading. Ethan. I didn't know what to do. Her tears fell faster. The doctors said he needed surgery immediately. Why didn't you call me? I did. She suddenly raised her voice. The emotion shocked everyone. I called you dozens of times. I froze. Dozens? No, you didn't. I did. She looked genuinely confused. Then hurt. Then angry. You never answered. I pulled out my phone. My old phone. The one I had carried overseas. There were no missed calls. No messages. Nothing. A terrible feeling settled into my chest. Something wasn't right. Ryan stepped forward again. That's because the calls never reached you. I turned. What? Ryan looked miserable. The calls were blocked. Every nerve in my body went cold. Blocked? Who would block them?
And why?
Then I noticed everyone staring at Daniel, including Emily, including my mother, including the guests. Slowly, I looked at him too. His face had gone pale. And suddenly I knew. Oh my God. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I stepped closer. You blocked her calls. He didn't answer. You blocked her calls. Still silence. The crowd began whispering. My anger exploded. You blocked her calls. Daniel finally snapped. Because you weren't good enough for her. The words echoed across the entire backyard. Everyone fell silent again. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Daniel realized what he had just admitted. Too late. The damage was done. I stared at him in disbelief. You sabotaged us. His expression hardened. I saved her. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because it was the most insane thing I had ever heard. You destroyed our relationship.
No.
Daniel pointed toward the mansion. Toward the expensive cars. Toward his luxury lifestyle. I gave her a future. Emily looked disgusted. For the first time all day, genuine disgust. And seeing that expression gave me hope. Because it meant she didn't love him. Not even a little. Daniel continued. You were gone. I clenched my fists. I was working. You were absent. I was providing for our future. Daniel smirked. And while you were chasing a future, I was actually here. The arrogance in his voice made my blood boil. I wanted to punch him. Right there. In front of everyone. But I forced myself to stay calm. Because there was still one question that mattered. The biggest question of all. I looked at Emily. If you didn't want this. My voice softened. Why are you standing here? The tears returned immediately. She looked completely broken. Then she said something that made my heart stop. Because he owns the hospital. I blinked. What? Daniel's expression changed. Emily pointed directly at him. He owns the company that funded my father's treatment. The crowd gasped. My stomach dropped.
No.
No way. Emily nodded through tears. He told me that if I left him, Her voice broke. The funding would disappear. The entire wedding erupted into shocked whispers. People stood from their seats. Others looked horrified. Even Daniel's own relatives seemed uncomfortable. I stared at him, trying to understand how someone could be this cruel. How someone could use a sick man as leverage. How someone could trap a woman into marriage. Then something even worse occurred to me. I looked at Emily. "Does your father know?" The answer came instantly.
No.
Of course he didn't. She had protected him. Protected him from the stress. Protected him from the truth. Protected him while destroying herself. The realization shattered me. For months, I had believed she betrayed me. For months, she had been fighting a battle completely alone. And I never knew, because someone made sure I never found out. I looked at Daniel. This time there was no confusion. No sadness. No heartbreak. Only rage. Pure rage. For the first time all afternoon, I wanted war. And judging by the fear suddenly appearing in Daniel's eyes, he finally realized it, because the moment I took another step toward him, a voice suddenly shouted from the front gate, "Stop this wedding." Everyone turned. A black SUV had just pulled into the driveway. The driver jumped out. Then an older man stepped onto the lawn. A weak man. A sick man. A man who wasn't supposed to be there. Emily gasped. Her bouquet fell from her hands. And tears flooded her eyes. Because standing at the entrance was her father. The entire wedding froze. Every guest turned toward the front gate. Every conversation stopped. Every face filled with shock. Because standing there was George Harper, Emily's father. The man who wasn't supposed to be there. The man everyone believed was too weak to leave the hospital. The man whose illness had started this entire nightmare. For a moment, nobody moved. Emily stared at him. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers and landed on the grass. "Dad." Her voice cracked. Tears immediately filled her eyes. George looked exhausted. His face was pale. His body was thinner than I remembered. But despite his weakness, determination burned in his eyes. He slowly walked forward, one step at a time. The crowd moved aside, creating a path. Nobody dared stop him. Nobody dared speak. The only person who looked terrified was Daniel. And that told me everything. George pointed directly at him, his hand shaking with anger. "You lied to my daughter." The words echoed across the lawn. Daniel's face lost all color. Emily looked confused. "Dad." George continued walking. "I know everything." Emily's eyes widened.
What?
The old man stopped beside her, then gently took her hand. The hand that Daniel had been holding moments earlier. "I know what he did." Emily looked completely stunned. Tears streamed down her face. "You weren't supposed to know." George smiled sadly. "I wasn't supposed to." His gaze shifted toward Daniel. "But I found out anyway." The crowd remained silent. Nobody wanted to miss a single word, because everyone could feel it. The truth was finally coming out.
And it was about to destroy someone.
George turned toward the guests.
Then toward me, Ethan.
I nodded respectfully. He stepped closer. "I'm sorry. The apology caught me off guard." "You don't owe me an apology." "Yes, I do." His voice trembled. "I should have protected both of you." I didn't know what to say. For months I had been angry, confused, heartbroken. But looking at him now, I couldn't blame him. He looked like a man carrying unbearable guilt. George took a deep breath, then looked at everyone. 3 months ago, I discovered something. The guests leaned forward. Daniel clenched his jaw. And suddenly I knew this was bad. Very bad. George reached into his coat pocket, then pulled out a small envelope. Daniel immediately panicked. "What are you doing?" Nobody missed the fear in his voice. George ignored him. He opened the envelope, then removed several documents. My stomach tightened. Whatever was inside those papers. Daniel desperately didn't want anyone to see it. George raised them high. "Daniel Brooks told my daughter that he was paying for my treatment." The crowd nodded. Everyone already knew that. Then George continued. "But he wasn't." A wave of confusion swept through the audience. "What?" Emily whispered. George handed her the documents. She looked down. her hands shaking. Then her eyes widened. Dad. Her voice barely escaped. Tears flooded her eyes again, because the papers revealed something unbelievable. Something nobody expected. The medical bills. Every single one of them. Already paid. Months ago. Paid in full. By someone else. Not Daniel. Not his company. Not his foundation. Someone else. My heart started racing, because suddenly I had a terrible suspicion. George looked directly at me, then smiled. You paid them. The world stopped. What? Emily looked at me, completely shocked. The guests looked at me. My mother looked at me. Even Ryan stared. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I never paid them. George nodded. Not directly. Then he explained. Months earlier, before leaving overseas, I had invested money into a medical charity program. A program I barely remembered. A program that secretly helped families who couldn't afford treatment. George's case had been selected. The surgery, the medication, the hospital costs, everything, paid for, using money from that fund. My money. I stood frozen, unable to process it. Meanwhile, Daniel looked like a man watching his entire world collapse, because his biggest lie had just been exposed. Emily turned toward him, her face filled with disbelief. You lied. Daniel said nothing. You lied to me. Still nothing. You made me believe my father's life depended on you. The crowd erupted into angry whispers. Daniel's relatives looked embarrassed. Several guests stood up and started leaving. Nobody wanted to be associated with what was happening. The wedding was falling apart. Fast. Emily stepped backward, away from Daniel. You manipulated me. Daniel finally exploded. I did it for us. The crowd gasped. Emily looked horrified. There is no us. The words hit him like a bullet. For the first time all day, Daniel looked defeated. But the nightmare wasn't over. Because George suddenly said something that nobody expected. Something that changed everything. Ethan still doesn't know the worst part. A chill ran down my spine. The worst part? What could possibly be worse than this? George's expression darkened. Then he slowly turned toward Daniel. Tell him. Daniel shook his head. No. Tell him. The old man's voice became harder. Daniel backed away. Fear filled his eyes. Real fear. The kind people feel when their secrets are about to be exposed. I stepped forward. What is he talking about? Nobody answered. I looked at Emily. She looked terrified again. Ryan looked nervous. My mother started crying. Suddenly I understood. There was another secret. A much bigger one. Something nobody wanted me to hear. I grabbed Daniel's collar. Tell me. Daniel tried, pulling away. But I didn't let go. Tell me now. His face went pale. Then, finally, he broke. And the next words that came out of his mouth changed my life forever. Ethan? He swallowed hard, then looked directly into my eyes. Emily isn't the one I wanted. The entire crowd fell silent. My grip tightened. What? Daniel laughed bitterly. A broken laugh. A defeated laugh. Then he revealed the truth. The truth nobody saw coming. I wasn't trying to steal your fiancé. My heart pounded. Then what were you trying to do? Daniel looked at me, straight into my eyes, and whispered. I was trying to destroy you. The world seemed to stop. I stared at Daniel, unable to process what he had just said. I wasn't trying to steal your fiancé. I was trying to destroy you. The crowd stood frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Emily looked shocked. What are you talking about? I asked. Daniel laughed. But it wasn't the confident laugh of a rich businessman. It was the laugh of a man who had finally lost everything. A broken laugh. A desperate laugh. The kind of laugh people make when they know the game is over. Slowly, he looked around at the guests. Then at Emily. Then at me. And finally he told the truth. It started 10 years ago. My stomach tightened. 10 years? I didn't even know him 10 years ago. Or so I thought. Daniel smiled bitterly. You don't remember me. I frowned. No. Exactly. The smile disappeared. But I remember you. A strange feeling crawled through my chest. Something about the way he said it made me uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Daniel took a deep breath, then pointed at me. When we were 18, we both applied for the same university scholarship. Suddenly, I remembered. Not Daniel,
But the scholarship.
it had changed my life. Without it, I never could have afforded college. Without it, I never would have built my career. Without it, everything would have been different. Daniel nodded, as if reading my thoughts. There were 2 finalists. I swallowed.
Me.
And him. Daniel continued. You won. The crowd listened carefully. You got the scholarship. His eyes filled with resentment. And I got nothing. I stared at him. That wasn't my fault. I know. His voice cracked. But I blamed you anyway. The truth was finally coming out. 10 years. 10 years of hatred. 10 years of obsession. 10 years of revenge. All because of something I didn't even know happened. Daniel looked exhausted, like carrying that hatred had poisoned him from the inside. I spent years watching you succeed. He pointed at me again. Every promotion, every achievement, every milestone, every happy moment. He watched all of it, and hated me more every day. Then one day, he discovered Emily, the woman I loved, the woman I planned to marry. And suddenly he saw an opportunity, a way to hurt me, a way to take something I could never replace, a way to win. His eyes shifted toward Emily. I never loved her. The words shattered her. Tears streamed down her face. The crowd gasped. Even the guests looked horrified. Daniel lowered his head. I only wanted what she represented. Emily looked like she had been punched. Years of manipulation. Years of lies. Years of emotional abuse. And now she finally knew the truth. She had never been the goal. She had only been a weapon, used against me. I felt sick. Nobody deserved that. Not even after everything that happened. Emily deserved better. Much better. Daniel laughed again. A hollow laugh. I thought if I took her from you,
He paused.
I'd finally feel like I won. Silence. Then he looked around. At the ruined wedding. At the empty chairs. At the guests already leaving. At Emily standing as far away from him as possible. And finally,
He understood something.
he had never won. Not once. Not ever. Because revenge hadn't made him happy. It had only made him miserable. George stepped forward, his voice calm. You wasted 10 years of your life hating someone who never hurt you. Daniel didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. Everything was over. The lies, the manipulation, the wedding, all of it. Police officers arrived 20 minutes later. Several guests had already called them, especially after learning how Daniel had used threats and deception to force Emily into the marriage. The officers escorted him away, without resistance, without argument, without dignity. As he reached the police car, he looked back one final time. Not at Emily, not at the crowd.
At me.
For a second, I saw something strange in his eyes. Not anger, not hatred, regret. Then the door closed, and he was gone. Forever. The following weeks were difficult. Very difficult. Trust doesn't magically return. Pain doesn't disappear overnight. And heartbreak doesn't heal in a single day. Emily and I spent hours talking. Then days. Then weeks. For the first time in months, there were no secrets, no lies, no misunderstandings. Just truth. Sometimes painful truth, but truth nonetheless. One evening, several months later, we sat together on the backyard patio. The same backyard where everything had fallen apart. The same backyard where a wedding had been destroyed. The same backyard where our lives changed forever. The sunset painted the sky orange and gold. Emily rested her head on my shoulder. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she smiled. You know,
What?
this is still my favorite place. I looked around. The grass, the flowers, the memories, good and bad. Even after everything? She nodded, because this is where the lies ended. I smiled, for the first time in a long time. A real smile, the kind that comes from peace. The kind that comes from surviving something painful. A few months later, I asked her to marry me again. This time, there were no secrets, no manipulations, no Daniel, no lies, just us. And when she said yes, it felt even more special than the first time, because this time, we truly understood what it meant to choose each other. 1 year later, we were married. Not in a luxury venue, not in a mansion, not with hundreds of guests.
Just family.
Close friends, and the people who genuinely loved us. As Emily walked down the aisle toward me, I realized something. Sometimes life breaks your heart before giving you what you deserve. Sometimes everything falls apart so the truth can finally come out. And sometimes, coming home early can save your entire future.